Hello there and welcome to our guest segment right here on the Breakfast Connect show, the one show that wakes you up every single morning with the news in business, market and the economy. And you know, right here in Africa Business Radio, we are more than enthusiastic about entrepreneurs and startups. And today we're talking about something that sort of scares business people a little bit across board, and that's macroeconomic instability, but political instability or economic instability. This scares a lot of businesses really, and that's because they operate according to forecasts and scenarios about the future, and all of this comprise surprises as well as certainties. However, as much as businesses factor in uncertainty, the one thing that they want to avoid at all costs is the instability in the macro environment that results from political gridlock, extremism, political dysfunction, and all of that. But how can they manage all of these situations and come out strong and profitable? Okay, so I've got an expert in the field joining me for conversations. She is Doris Pajon, Crisis Management Underwriter, Allianz. Hello, Doris. It's good to have you on the show. Good morning.
Good morning, Rachel.
You're welcome. So, Doris, this is indeed a very timely conversation. I find this very timely because social unrest is sweeping through developing countries, more like a reminder of income inequalities that have deepened during this COVID-19 crisis period. You are a crisis management underwriter, Doris. How much of a brunt has this had on businesses in developing countries rather?
Well, as you say, it's right the timing to speak about civil unrest. And if you look at one of the barometers that we issue at Allianz, we issue a risk barometer. Civil unrest incidents, they have been identified as one of the top 10 risks. And if you spot Africa and Middle East particularly, it's part of the top 5 risks identified for the developing countries. To me, it has direct effects on companies because first it's causing some physical damage to businesses. On a couple of occasions, we've seen shops, supermarkets being absolutely burned. It's causing major loss of revenues due to the business interruption. And of course, it's affecting the staff and the resources too. If we speak about macroeconomy, the impact of the losses we've seen are in billions of US dollars, and it has a huge impact on the GDP of some of the countries. It's placing thousands and thousands of jobs at risk. And I would say that globally it's causing some uncertainty, and we all know that economy needs confidence.
True.
But I also want to stress that public protests can be very important because it drives the changes for a need of change of policy. Sometimes it forces governments to listen actually and respond to their people. And also it promotes social dialogue at some point. So I think in that sense it could also be seen as a positive.
Right. Well, I think when things like this happen, there are usually early signs that these risks are on the rise. In fact, in an Allianz paper, there is more like a warning that companies need to prepare for more political disturbances and violence ahead. So what are these early warning signs? Because sometimes it's usually a very tiny spark that ignites unrest. For example, we have the one in South Africa sometime in July, a deadly protest that kicked off. That was after the arrest of ex-President Jacob Zuma. And then also here in Nigeria, that was towards the end of last year. We also had a share of, I don't know, maybe you can categorize it under political or social unrest. And that was as a result of series of events, that led to that particular act. So what exactly are the warning signs that lead up to this? More like a watch out sign for businesses.
Well, it's a very good question, Rachel. And let me be very humble. I think generally speaking, it's really hard to predict when a city or a country will suffer political violence. It's extremely hard. You mentioned South Africa. I think no one had in mind that South Africa would be suffering riots in the past month. Same for France and the Yellow Vests, same for Chile, Colombia. So we need to be all very humble. Having said that, you're right, also saying that we have some signals, some warnings that we could be monitoring. And just to give you a few, we can anticipate the days before and after the controversial elections, for instance, in a country. We can anticipate when the parliament or the government is about to issue some measures reducing the civil rights, for instance, or voting an increase of taxes. So this can be monitored beforehand. When there is an incident also involving some police brutality, as we've seen in the US, for instance, causing the deaths of people, it's clear that it will be a time to prevent and anticipate a potential crisis. You could also mention COVID-19 because most of the people had difficulties to access health services. And finally, I would say that the social media is absolutely key to monitor, because if you spot some effervescences on a particular event, for instance, people exposing some acts of corruption or calling for boycotts, it could be the beginning of a major wave of unrest.
Right. All right. I think having mentioned all of this, it's proper for us to talk about moves to make to recover, because countless of businesses have somehow tumbled during political and social unrest, added to COVID-19 crisis and all, and so some could not even survive. So the question now is, how exactly can businesses recover from civil unrest?
Well, I would say the key thing is preparation. And so if you have a defined and tested crisis management plan, I mean, it's vital. But as your question really focused about what we could do to recover after, I would say first check the greatest assets of your company, your employees. Check their safety. This should be a priority to you. Check where they are, if they can be contacted regularly, if they need psychological support. Ask them also to keep some low profile, because your industry is targeted by some protesters, like finance, for instance.
Right.
I would also say protect your vacant facilities. We've seen events where riots, where weeks after weeks there are demonstrations on the streets. And I would say remove all the non-essential equipment in your facilities. Okay. Turn off the gas, electricity, water services. Prepare for long-time unrests. Most importantly, you can get the help of crisis management experts. Why is important? Because they have response team on the ground. They can help you assess the situation and, get back quickly on the business as soon as you can. And lastly, because we're in insurance business, I would say speak to your insurance company and your broker. They may have some tips for you, and it's their job to help you recover.
Right. And this is exactly what you guys in Allianz do. You provide risk consultancy, property casualty insurance solutions, and alternative risks transfer for a wide spectrum of commercial, corporate, and specialty risks across 10 dedicated lines of businesses. So how can business owners tap into all of these services?
All you mentioned is correct. Allianz Global Corporate Specialty, AGCNS, is a global corporate insurance company. So yes, of course, we do provide risk consultancy, property casualty insurance, and as you mentioned, we are wide in terms of the line of business that we write.
Right.
I would also add that it's important to mention that we've been operating in Africa for more than a century. So we have lots of diverse clients across Africa, and the best way to access to us is actually to speak to corporate brokers.
Okay, great. Just to wrap up this conversation now real quick, Doris, thank you so much for being here this long, but what does political violence insurance cover for businesses? Just to wrap this up real quick.
Yeah, so political violence insurance, it covers a wide range of perils, and very basic is terrorism and sabotage. Then you could add on top strikes, riots, civil commotion. And as we've been discussing over the past 5 minutes, this is clearly the heart of what we do. And unrest would fall under that category. You could also get malicious damage, insurrection, revolution, rebellion, the coup d'etat, the war, the civil war. What we do, essentially, is that we cover for the property damage, the business interruption, but we can also add some very important components. Denial of access. So typically, when a business is closed because authorities have closed the area, you cannot access to your premises, and we would pay for that, for the loss of earnings as a result of that closure. And you don't even need to have a damage or yes or no. It's denial of access, and this is an increasing demand in cover. Loss of attraction also is very important, because being closed, businesses cannot attract customers, so we would pay for that also. So globally, and I think it won't be a surprise to you, there is a massive increase in demand all over the world, actually, for that political violence cover.
Well, that's quite expected, Doris. I mean, things are really going out of hand these days.
Okay, I want to add also that Allianz has an office in Nigeria based in Lagos.
All right, great. Thank you. But hopefully, I mean, we've got Allianz, and we hope that business will be able to come back on track and start being profitable again. Thank you so much, Doris. It's been amazing having this conversation with you. Well, I've been speaking with Doris Pajon. She is a crisis management underwriter at Allianz. Thank you once again, Doris. The Breakfast Connect show continues in just a moment. Stay here.